Right, let's start with the Daily Mail then. Starmer, the £18 million penthouse, and excuses that just don't add up, according to the Daily Mail. This is, look, the Labour leader, and I spoke to him about it at the Labour Party conference as well. There were a lot of donations coming from one particular person, Lord Ali. And now it has emerged that during the GCSE period, the Labour leader used Lord Ali's penthouse so that his son could study in peace, because he said basically there was a bun fight outside the house. There were numerous reporters. It was really disruptive. And people are saying that's fine, but there are also libraries where people can go and study, or you could go round, maybe your son could have gone round to one of his friends' houses. Is this serious? Is this getting sort of cumulatively more of a problem for Keir Starmer?
I think it's a big problem, because the fact that we're speaking about it now, it's rumbled on for a few days. And look, I've got two issues with this. I think it was excessive. I understand getting football tickets, but getting people to buy you suits and then glasses, and the bill was £3,500. I don't know what these spectacles were like. They must have been gold-plated. I mean, that's nuts.
Or rose-tinted.
Maybe. I don't know, he's been too gloomy, really, for that. I think they're certainly not rose-tinted in his case. But look, the second issue I have, because I lived through that and I was in government at the time, was that he went after Boris for, and took the moral high ground when Boris, with the wallpaper and all of that. And now he looks like, I'm afraid, a hypocrite, because what he's saying is that, Boris was corrupt and took, favours and freebies, and he's doing exactly the same thing. And I'd say to a greater degree.
Ayesha, in his defence, the difference would be declarations, transparency. I mean, the Labour defence is, but we are declaring it all, it's all out in the open, it's not corrupt. We're being very clear about what we're taking. Do you think that stands up?
Well, look, they certainly are declaring everything, and I think it's really important to know, you've mentioned Boris Johnson. I mean, if we want to start drawing the comparisons to Boris Johnson, then that does not sit very well for Boris Johnson. If you look at...
He never set himself up as a moral paragon.
I know, can I finish?
Yeah, of course you can. You can always finish.
Thank you. Thanks ever so much.
So polite.
But, for example... The allegation is that has there been any sort of undue influence? Yeah. So, for example, if you look at Boris Johnson, he had a big loan organised for him, and then that guy became chair of the BBC. So there is no there's no suggestion here that that there's been any sort of return of favours.
Except Lord Ali got a pass to number 10, Downing Street.
He did, but apparently that's now gone and that has not happened. But I just want to say, look, this does not look good, OK? I'm absolutely conceding that. This does not look good, and particularly when people are having a difficult time. Now, I don't want to sort of go into what was going on with his son. I don't know his son. His son is a teenager. I don't think any of us would like our children to be sort of talked about. And if you are in the public eye, as we all are, I think, you're very protective of your kids. So I don't want to sort of...
But Keir brought him into the equation by explaining why he was using the flat.
But I do think, this is an issue that people are... I'm not sort of saying that, look, it's nothing to see here. I am conceding that this is an issue that a lot of people are upset about. A lot of this stuff was happening, before he was Prime Minister. I think he and his team do need to sort of try and make sure that going forward there aren't these issues, because the big issue for me, and I've just come back from Labour Party conference, I was there till the bitter end, the strong feeling is, look, even though this government has a massive majority, there are lots and lots of problems. Got to try and fix this country, and at the end of the day, this government has got to get on with delivering for this country. And a lot of these stories... they're not happy about, but you can understand why people are upset, because people are having a hard time and the government's got to deliver.
I just want to go back on something you said. I've always brought up with the previous government the Nolan standards of behaviour in public life. You said the issue is whether there has been undue influence. If you forgive me, I think the issue is whether people could potentially believe there has been undue. It's not whether there has been, it's whether the optics look like they could be putting yourself in a position of... That's surely the right test,
no,
isn't
I
it?
absolutely agree with that, absolutely. It's about the letter of the law and the rules, but also the spirit of them as well. And I think, going forward, And you know, there were people talking about this at conference, from the delegates to ministers to new MPs. I think everybody has to think, you know, quite carefully about how this looks as well. I'm not disagreeing with you.
No. Meanwhile, at conference, the unions won the vote on the winter fuel allowance. Now, it actually means nothing for anyone who's losing their winter fuel allowance this winter. But it's remarkable, Kwasi. This was the winter fuel allowance, the £200 or £300 if you're over 80, was brought in by Gordon Brown in 2009.
That's right.
Over 14 years of Conservative government, chancellors wouldn't touch it.
They wouldn't touch it, no, because we'd have been roasted on this. There's no way politically, and you could argue morally, that we could have done something like this. And sometimes, you know, it takes a government of the left to be radical in this way. What I found interesting about the union's position was that the way that the policies had been rolled out, the union pay deal was announced first, and it was almost as if the winter fuel payment was announced afterwards in order to pay for or the union pay increase.
The
That's how it was presented.
Pay increase, yeah.
And what's interesting is that the unions have voted...
To be fair, it was announced when it was announced, because if it hadn't, people like me would have been out there if you announced it in the budget saying this is way too soon and you haven't given people time to prepare for it.
That's true.
So the timing was nothing to do with that. The timing was because you have to give a legitimate notice to the public that the payment wasn't coming in time.
But Martin, you also have to balance the books. I mean, that was one of the things that undid me, frankly, was that you've got to show where the money's coming from. And to be fair to the government, that's what I think they were trying to do. But it's backfired because it's been a very unpopular measure.
The issue for me on this, and I think that part of the problem with the vote at Labour conference, look, I've been very outspoken on the winter fuel payment. I don't have a problem, and I don't think many people have a problem with the ending of universality. You know, no one's sitting there campaigning for Alan Sugar's, nothing to do with Alan himself, Alan Sugar's not to get it. The issue is twofold. The level of the means testing, £11,400 of income, is, in my view, too low. It leaves many people just above it. And the method of means testing via pension credit leaves over 800,000 people of the poorest in society, because pension credit is critically underclaimed, that the government says should be getting this benefit, not getting this benefit. The problem with the votes that we've had, both in Parliament and yesterday, is should we cancel winter fuel? So my answer is we should get... It is more nuanced. You're getting rid of universality isn't the issue, it's where you draw the line. And in some ways, the votes like yesterday aren't that useful because it becomes binary, and it isn't binary.
But in government, that's always the problem. I mean, that's one of the challenges of means testing. Firstly, administratively, it's much more costly to do that effectively. And you're always going to get cliff edges. You're always going to get cases on the margin where someone in such and such a condition gets the benefit and someone else, almost identical, doesn't. And that's, you know, from the point of view of being in government, having been in government, that's a really difficult question to square. So I understand why they've gone down this route, but again, it's
Do you think,
political difficulty.
Obviously you were Chancellor. You had a disaster, as you know.
Yeah, we were undone.
You would acknowledge. Do you think that Labour ministers are finding it tougher than they imagined?
Oh, it's very hard. Look, I mean, this isn't easy. I mean, it's not just a British problem either. You've got a situation where you've got rising costs in terms of public expenditure, and you know, for various reasons, we haven't had the growth across the West, with the exception of the US, probably. But across the West, we haven't had the growth levels over the last 15 years that can pay for the rising costs of public expenditure. And every country in the West, in the G7, has to deal with this issue.
Did you want to talk about a phrase that, I don't know, we don't want people to switch off.
Stay with us, stay tuned.
But can you talk about fiscal rules, Martin?
So look,
as you've got a former Chancellor here to discuss that with.
I do. There has been much talk, and the Prime Minister said it, and the Chancellor has said it, about changing... They've mooted they may be doing it, changing the fiscal rules. Now, that sounds really arcane, but what it is it is a way that they can spend a lot more money. Right. They're talking about the fiscal black hole. They're saying that constrains us. So changing the rules says if we want to invest 15, 20 billion pounds in Britain's economy, our infrastructure, our roads, our hospitals, if we change the rules, we can do it. So it sounds geeky. It's actually probably the single biggest thing that may happen to our finances over the next couple of years, because it means they can spend money. Can they change the rules? How would they change the rules to give them more money?
They could do that. I mean, the OBR itself, and that was one of the issues we had.
The Office of Budget Responsibility.
Yeah, that's right. Was only set up 11 years ago. It's not something that's set in stone. And we tried to short-circuit that, and I think that was half the difficulty that the government had, was because of that. So they can change the rules, but the issue that I think they'll have is that, these are capital expenditure. So it's money on big projects, it's money on investment. And you'll only see the benefit of that maybe in 2 or 3 years. The issue you have with current spending is in-year spending. So that's, in effect, what the government's spending week on week, day by day. And that's still going to be a big problem. So it allows you, if they change the rules, to spend money on capital things, on big things.
Investing on big
That's right.
Investing on big stuff for the country, help the country in the future.
By analogy, it's, you're borrowing money maybe to enhance your house or your property or your flat. But you still have to deal with it day-to-day spending. You still have to pay energy bills, you still have to pay groceries, you still have to...
So this is something which people in the Labour Party are really hoping happens.
Right.
And, of course, we're in this kind of holding pattern now until the budget, which is...
On the 30th of October.
30th of October. But that is going to be the really seminal moment for this new government.
Yes.
And, all the difficulties that we're talking about from the Winter Fuel Allowance, and I think there will be more cuts coming down the track, certainly from the mood music from Rachel Reeves. And we had that speech in the Rose Garden kind of signalling, look, things are going to be really difficult. And that has contributed to lots of people saying it's all too sort of gloomy. The one thing, the sort of chink of light that people are really, really holding out for is this change in the fiscal rules. Because a central theme of Keir Starmer's speech was, building a Britain that belongs to you, better housing, more opportunities for your children, et cetera, et cetera. Well, people are saying, how are you going to do that? We all want the economy to grow. So this is a thing that lots of people have been pushing for a long time, including very senior people who've been involved in the Treasury, a man called Nick McPherson, who used to sort of run the Treasury.
That's right.
Lots of senior people have said, and advisors, economic advisors have said, change this rule so it just gives you a bit more wriggle room, because all the things, if you look at the housing crisis that we've got at the moment, if you look at, if we want to build more infrastructure, we have to take the jump now and do it.
People don't want to know. I'm just going to give them just an idea of what it means. They're not actually talking about changing the rule that you can't invest more. They're talking about what counts. So it would be some of Bank of England debts wouldn't count, or the new GB energy firm wouldn't count, or student loan debt wouldn't count, taking a few things out of the pot so they can invest more.
But basically, it's giving the government more width and wiggle room, and it's allowing them to make big investments, which we haven't really done in this country. It's really fallen off. If you look at the
Rachel Reeves has written about that a lot in the past. So
that's right.
And
if they do this,
we've probably done enough of it now. People at home maybe start to leave it at this time.
How does it affect me? That's what people need to know.
More money, government spending more money on infrastructure and building all the stuff around us, the hospitals, the roads, the schools that we need.
The prisons.
Fixing the
prisons.
And the prisons and pylons and things like that. Very important.
But it's got to be productive.
Get Britain building.
But you see, if you build all this stuff and ramp up the debt and you don't get the growth, you're an even bigger problem than you were at the beginning.
You've got to pay more interest. Right, let's talk about... Talking about prisons, we have what looks like another disaster, which is that a number of prisoners released under that early release scheme a couple of weeks ago, and we had champagne corks popping outside prisons.
Spliffs.
Apparently. I don't want to identify anyone in these pictures, but dozens of people released from jail under that prison scheme were freed by mistake. A Ministry of Justice source said that 37 people released in error on the 10th of September because their offences had been wrongly logged. This meant that some cases weren't flagged for exemptions. Most of them have been brought back into prison, but 5 prisoners have not yet been returned to prison. I mean, honestly, if you've been released and then you're brought back, that sort of feels like an injustice. But for those people affected by those crimes, the fact that those prisoners were let out at all feels like an injustice, doesn't it?
Of course. And look, there are many, victims who will feel really upset about this. There are many victims, by the way, who are very, very upset with the whole concept of early release anyway. Remember, this government has had to move that to 40% of the tariff. It was 50% before, and there was overcrowding in prisons. So I completely understand that a lot of people will be understandably really upset about this and really worried about this. Look, I understand why the government has had to do this, because it did get to the stage, even the former Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, has said, look, things were absolutely terrible, and probably if this government had won, they would have had to do something similar. But the execution of this has got to be, particularly when you're dealing with prisoners, has got to be... There was another issue about sort of tags as well.
Yes.
When you're doing this, you have to make sure that you're across all of the detail. But, of course, there will be things that go wrong. I suppose the thing is, if something goes wrong, you have to try and rectify it quickly, and all but 5 have been brought back.
The thing is, Kwasi, so the thing that's so chilling about this is that dozens of offenders convicted of breaching a restraining order have been wrongly let out of jail.
Yeah, that's scary.
That's scary.
Especially if you were the victim of those people. I mean, what I would say is that, you know, bureaucracy, no matter who's in government, is not perfect. So you had 1,700 people that were released, and you could have bet a lot of money that some of them would have been released wrongly. That's just the nature of...
The thing I find...
I'm not condoning it.
No.
I'm just saying that that's what happens.
And you would imagine... Look, when you've been in government for years and years and years, as your team were, I can kind of see how, you know, things get... sort of slip under the radar or things go wrong. If it's your first prisoner release...
That's right.
Wouldn't you, as the Justice Secretary, go, make sure every single one of these is logged, tagged, tracked and eligible? How is that...
Well, I think to be fair, knowing Shabana Mahmood, I don't think she's somebody who would have been like, yeah, I don't really care about this. I'm taking, you know, I'm going to sort of be lackadaisical about it. You know, she has thought about little else. You know, I think she was the First Minister that had to make a really, really difficult announcement on this, and she is spending her time going into prisons and speaking with people. Now, this is completely unfortunate. There's no way of kind of spinning it sort of otherwise. But I just think when a situation is... when something has been so hollowed out, like our prisons and the whole of the criminal justice system, we're not even talking about probation, by the way, and, you know, parole officers and people that have to sort of deal with people when they come out. Now, when people come out from prison, they need housing. There isn't enough housing. Often they say if people can have a roof over their head, it will stop them, you know, reoffending or getting into drugs. We know that there's a housing crisis. We talk about the victims. The victims are of course, going to be traumatised by this. But let's not forget, many victims of rape have not for years seen their cases get to court. We're talking about a backlog in the court system.
True. But in terms
I just think, I understand the anger, but I think we also just have to be realistic about when something is so broken, it is going to take time to fix.
The issue that the government has is that this is politically very, very toxic, potentially. Yeah. I mean, just talking to... I was in my former constituency and also where I live in London. This issue has had more cut through than pretty much everything else. I mean, you know, I was just, you know, and people are saying, well, hang on, why are these prisoners being let out? And also people feel, I mean, I live in South East London near Belmarsh. People are thinking, you know, who's going to be let loose?
But Kwasi, your government would have had to do this.
I don't want to get...
I know, but you would have had to do this.
I'm not getting into the political argy-bargy about it. I agree. I'm not saying that everything we did was right, but I'm just saying that for the government now, because they're in charge now and they're responsible, this is a very dangerous situation.
Let's talk about something completely different. Air fryers. Right. That got a very enthusiastic response.
I've never bought one.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I'm not sure...
But apparently they're now the third most used appliance.
Yeah, I'm interested in
most used appliance in British kitchens after your toaster and your microwave.
Except we were debating this, but we had quite a heated debate about this, friend. Where's the kettle? I would have thought the kettle would have been the most used.
You see,
That's such a good point.
No,
What's going on with the
hot
kettle?
water taps, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, but
how many people have
I don't think younger people drink tea and coffee in the way that older people necessarily.
Right, OK.
So they're more likely to buy an air fryer, I can imagine.
So I need to declare to everybody here, I'm very tempted to keep my mouth shut on this, because any time I mention that word, the word, there are thousands...
Sorry, what's the phrase, Martin?
You know, the word, the AF word. There are thousands of clickbait stories from 2 years ago that appear as new news stories about me commenting on these appliances.
And what did you say?
Well, all I've ever said is you have to look at... They are not necessarily the most efficient way to cook. If you're making a large dinner, you're still better to do it in a large oven and cook everything all at once. Is cheaper on the energy bills. And this continues to ring on the clickbait stories as if it's a new thing time and time and again. They're great for 1 or 2 portion meals, cooked quickly, cooked shortly. They taste really good, but they aren't always It's not that bad. They aren't always
if you're
the
doing
most
big,
efficient way. If you're cooking a big Sunday roast for 12 people, put it in your oven.
Well, you'd need a massive...
All
You
in
need like
once,
an industrial... I have to say, I'm obsessed with my air fryer. Right? I am
How can you be obsessed with that?
Because I'm the worst cook ever. Like, I'm literally the worst cook. Like, so I tried to put a steak in a toaster once. Like, that is how bad a cook I am. I thought it would be, like, quite a clever thing to do. It did not go well. Basically, the air fryer has revolutionised my life. It is brilliant.
What do you make?
I do a really good, like...
Yeah, that seems to be a
really
common.
good, sort of nice, spicy chicken. Really good. It's the only thing I can cook. And honestly, it's the only thing that keeps me alive. It stopped me getting, like, takeout and all that sort of thing.
Yes.
But people are obsessed. Do you know, one day I was on the tube and I saw a guy carrying an air fryer and it was like a double air fryer. Like, it was... And I went... And at one point, you could
got a double air fryer.
Really?
Stop showing...
Yeah.
No one likes to show off, Susanna. And then...
Trouble with a double air fryer is it's just the same size as a normal air fryer, but with two smaller,
Oh, I see.
That's
smaller
right.
drawers.
I went up to him, everyone was looking at him because there was a bit of a shortage of air fryers at, like, and I remember going up to him and saying, "Where did you get that?" And he held it closer to him, like
Yeah,
I was
so you're
going to
gonna take
rob
it away.
it off him. And he kind of, like, protected it
So
like it
you
was a baby.
sound like a saleswoman for an air fryer.
I literally am. I could be like the
should be
face of air fryer.
I know, it's terrible.
You're not convinced,
You could be
Kwasi?
the face of air fryers
I'm not-
instead of me.
I'm
Thank
not-
you. Enjoy it.
I think Martin's point is true. I mean, if you're cooking for a family or large numbers, I don't get it. I don't know why you would use an air fryer, but
Typical Tory, out of touch with modern Britain.
typical Tory. I want to look after my money.
Right, well, Martin,
Stay here because
Kidding,
Martin's
kidding.
got some very good tips on how to look after your money. What are you talking about this morning? Meter readings.
Let's do meter readings now. It's meter reading week, which is a week I call it. It used to be meter reading day, but then we crashed all the energy firms' systems, so now I call it meter reading week. Prices are changing. They're going up on the 1st of October, next Tuesday, by 10%.
Oh.
Now, the point is, if you're on monthly direct debit and you don't have a working smart meter, and unfortunately 20% of smart meters don't work, and I've written to Ed Miliband about that, they need to change the targets from installations to working smart meters, but that's not what we're talking about at this moment. Right, if you don't have a working smart meter, you should be doing a meter reading at some point around next Tuesday. You could do it now, you could do it a few days after. Here's why. This is the current price, this is the new price. If you don't do a meter reading, they're assuming how much of your usage was on the cheap price, how much of your usage was on the expensive price. So they could assume more of it was on the expensive price than it was. Do a meter reading, you draw a line, and you're going to get the correct amount billed to you, not too much at the higher level. The other thing that goes into this, slightly different tip, if you are on a non-smart electricity prepayment meter, specifically, what dictates to your meter the price you pay is when you top up. So my tip for you is top up now before next Tuesday and you're on the current price, and then try and keep that going as long as possible until you top up again, and your meter will stay on the current cheaper price once you get into October. Doesn't work with Scottish Power, who will claw that back. Other companies keep the right to claw back the extra amount you should have paid, but the vast majority don't do it in practice. So if you are on a non-smart electricity prepayment meter, not Scottish Power, then I can't 100% promise it. Topping up now can keep you on the current cheaper rates for longer, and just hold until you top up again until the last minute.
And if you're doing a meter reading, any time.
I mean, you could do it a few days before, a few days after. You know, it doesn't really make any difference. You just want to make sure you're not running a few weeks over and they're going to be able to, assuming that you've used more at the higher rate. I'm not suggesting they do it deliberately, but it's done by algorithm, and the algorithm could work against you.